Hey friends, it's Rick here again from Rock Island. Getting ready to head out. It's a nice day here on Thursday. But just before that, I'm going to talk a little more about football. Yesterday I talked about Herschel Walker. Today, modern NFL. And I've had a video similar to this last year, I believe. But what really propelled me for this video is some really good commentary I saw on a Facebook board that I have of Retro NFL. People, old fans like myself, who love the league. I remember when the league was really much better, we believe, than it is now. So it showcases 5 great running backs from the past. The post starts out. O.J. Simpson, Franco Harris, Tony Dorsett, Earl Campbell, and Walter Payton. 5 are the best that ever played and very effective with their teams. Very notable Hall of Famers, every one of them. And it says, based upon today's headlines and priorities, these guys would no longer be worth paying. They're not playing the same game anymore. It's sad because the running game, these guys, all these running backs that you see, played into their 30s and for the most part were effective toward the end, which is not the case with running backs now. By 28, most of them are done. Running games are secondary now. They've turned the game into arena football. They've effectively changed the rules to arena football, which I think is sad. You don't even need good defenses anymore. And one guy actually brought up, I'm going to read you some of these quotes I think are very, very astute. Back in the day, you had to have a good defense to win Super Bowl, 70s, 80s, 90s. You had to have one of the top defenses. If you didn't, I don't care how many points you scored, you would get bounced out in the playoffs. The Chargers were an example. Anybody who knows old football, they were a scoring machine with Dan Fouts in like 79, 80, 81, 82. They would never get to the Super Bowl because in their playoffs, their defense would let them down. Miami, nobody can move the football any better in his heyday than Dan Marino, but he never had a top defense. Nowadays, those guys would easily, they'd flourish because now you don't even need a top defense. Look at the Chiefs, the last couple of Super Bowls they've won. They haven't even had halfway decent defense, and not even half of the league, midway of the league. It doesn't matter. Chiefs didn't even have a great running game this year, but they have a great quarterback. That's all that's all it needs right now. You win games 38-35, 42-35. Nobody, look at the Super Bowl. There was no defense in the Super Bowl. It was just whoever got the ball last. And another thing with today's is the rules and all the penalties on defense. Look how the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. On a half-ass stupid call, it shouldn't have been called on a non-catchable ball. You don't do that in a game. You let them play. But defenses don't have any opportunity to make big plays anymore. When it comes down to it, no big plays. The problem with all the scoring is that it's cheap. Back in the day when you had guys like Elway, the drive in 1986, very notable, big long drive that tied the game against Cleveland, that made them go into overtime and they won to go to the Super Bowl. And of course, Joe Montana, who kick-started the 49ers dynasty against the then very good Dallas team on the catch, the drive that put them ahead, and they eventually won by a point to go to Super Bowl and start their great dynasty. The reason why those were highlighted, those drives, is because it was very difficult to do. The defenses were very good. The rules weren't all in favor of the offense, and only the best quarterbacks would lead teams to victory like that. Now anybody can do it. During a season, how many people, if there's like 2-3 minutes in a game, and you're up by 3-6 points, and the other team has the ball, there's over 50% chance they're going down the field to get a field goal, maybe even a touchdown. Anybody can do it, especially if it's a high-scoring game. Your defense is done. You know that. If it's like a 35-31 game and the other team has the ball last, they're probably scoring. It's like arena football. There's no credibility to point scoring now because anybody can do it. Anybody can complete passes. So it's like having $100 when inflation is low versus having $100 like right now. The value is different. Having $100 in 1978 meant something. Having $100 now, that's what they've done in football. They've cheapened scoring that anybody can do it. Why? Well, some good commentaries down here. It's interesting. Some of the commentaries. The running game was a physical game. Tackle football is gradually being phased out. What I feel now is a form of flag football, somebody says. And somebody listen to this. Somebody put this comment down, okay? I said the same thing. It's an arena league now, NFL style. It's all about passing game. You don't even need a great defense to win. Just look at Kansas City. Then somebody put the NFL as a corporate powerhouse. They could care less what the game looks like. They're also a very woke league as well. Very, very woke. But it's interesting reading all this stuff down here. Listen to this down here. This is going to knock you. The owners change the rules every year to increase scoring to appeal to marginal fans and drive up TV ratings, which equals increased revenue. Kind of like converting classical music or jazz music into pop music for mass appeal. Patrons with short attention spans generate more money. So true. Defenders are just faceless stuntmen getting flagged into submission until they give up the inevitable touchdown everyone wants to see. Progress. It's a complete different sport now. 100%. What a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful commentary. So true. Back in the day, defenses were notable for shutdown corners. Deion Sanders. He might not have been the hottest hitter, but my God, try completing a flurry of passes on his side. Very, very well known that the 95 Super Bowl, when the Steelers quarterback, I forget his name now, he threw 2 interceptions that were basically right to Larry Brown for Dallas. A lot of people say the reason he did that was he was afraid to go to Deion Sanders' side. He shut down complete side. Remember the Ronnie Lott? You would go to his side, you'd get your head taken off. Mike Haynes, he played for the Patriots and then the Raiders, one of the best. Rod Woodson. I just go on. These guys were well known. The Steelers, Mel Blount. I mean, guys, they would take your head off if you went there. You were afraid to sometimes throw their way or the receivers run their way because you get beaten. Okay? And it was legal. It was tough to complete passes. Now you name one shutdown corner in the league. Name one. The closest I can think is the guy Dallas just signed that played for the Patriots and he's older. I forget his name. He played with the Colts last year, but the Cowboys picked him up this year. He's like 32. He played with the Patriots. He's pretty good. But, I mean, I wouldn't call him a shutdown. Nobody's a shutdown corner nowadays because you're just not allowed to be with receivers. You'll get flagged. You're not allowed to play defense. That Super Bowl is an example. You're not holding, penalty, ball was 20 yards over, penalty, free first down, win the game. That's what you do nowadays. You let the offenses rule. Why? Like that guy says, you get the marginal fans that are more scoring makes them, it's like sugar, eating chocolate. Oh, more scoring. There was nothing. You know how much fun it was back in the day when you saw a game that was 13-10 and the defenses were ravenous and it was tough as hell to move the football? That's not boring football. That's excellent football. First downs are tough. And you just take the best, only the best. Like when you play the defenses like the Steelers in the 70s, Dallas when they were good, the Rams, okay, the Raiders, some of these great teams, and then the Giants and the remember the Bears defense of '85? They would take a game over. It was, and when Dan Marino, they only lost one game that year. When Marino basically carved them up on Monday night, that was the only time the Bears defense was vulnerable because Marino had a quick release. And it was an amazing thing for him to be able to pass through that incredible defense because nobody else could do it. That defense was so incredible. There's no defenses. Now it's just, like he said, faceless names, the defense. They change every year, free agency. I follow Dallas, but I don't even know who's in the secondary. Stephon Gilmore, that's the guy they got from the Patriots. That's the one guy I know now because they picked him up. Other than that, I don't know who the hell's in my secondary every year. I don't care. Because they change and this and that and go here and there. And there's no... The defenses are... It's a joke. And, you know, here's another guy. Every rule change since 1978 has been made in favor of the passing game. More and more and more and more and more. But it's really kicked in 2005 and 6. It really kicked when a guy from the Colts, Irsay, I believe, didn't like the fact that the Patriots were beating on Peyton Manning's receivers in the playoff game. He wanted to make the rules, and he won, where you can't even fart next to a receiver without a penalty now. That's nuts. Pretty soon they will develop some kind of halo field put around a quarterback so you can throw under pressure. You know? And it's interesting, because I'm a big Tom Brady fan, even though I've never... Here's a comment. You mean Tom Brady didn't have a halo? Some credit his offensive line. Defenders just took a flag 15 years for brushing against him. And I'm not cutting down Brady, but there's a point there. All these quarterbacks that premier are very important to their football teams. Therefore, everything's done to protect them to the point where defenders can't do anything anymore. You know, it's remember when they did create a new rule when Brady tore his knee. Now defenders have to get up off the ground before they can touch the quarterback. And it's true. Every time a quarterback gets hurt, I mean, it's part of the game. Nobody wants anybody to get hurt. But if you change rules every time somebody does, you have a very different game. You have a wimpified game. He said the owners will wake up one day and say, dang, arena football is back. Last team that gets the ball wins. Not sure that's the direction to go, but that's what's happening. That's what's happening. I see these, you had the Super Bowl last year, and I looked at the Super Bowl several years ago when Philly won their Super Bowl against New England. I think 5 years ago, whatever it was, like 41-37. Both teams had over 500 yards of offense. It was over 1,100 yards passing between the two teams. There was no defense at all. I mean, is that what you want the NFL to go to, where you just sit there and just up and down the field, up and down the field? That seems to be what they want to do. I don't find that interesting. But from an old school fan that seen football as it come up through I find that extremely dull and boring, predictable. Whoever gets the ball last wins. Oh, wow. I mean, to the point where, remember a couple of years ago when the Chiefs beat the Bills? The Bills had taken, it was a high-scoring game. The Bills had taken the lead with 13 seconds to go, and the defense couldn't even stop the Chiefs from getting a field goal with 13 seconds to go in the game. That's what the NFL's come to. It's come to the point where it's true. Anybody can score. Anybody. You look at the stats. Anybody. Any team. You look at the stats compared to years ago, and you say, "Oh wow, look how better quarterbacks are nowadays. They complete so many more passes. They don't throw the interceptions. Of course not, because they don't get the pressure from the defenders. They don't have the pressure from the secondary. They don't have any of that because they've changed the rules. If you throw Marino, Fouts, Elway, people like that in today's game, they would roll yards too. Easy. Marino was throwing those type of yards back then. Imagine what he would do now when he could just throw endlessly to wide open people and not have to worry about getting hit. I mean, that's what the league has become. And it's sad, I believe. I honestly believe that. And it's not because here's another guy, true, which is why the GOAT debate is not irrelevant today. Average quarterbacks racking up more yards in the past now. Tom Brady was great, but I bet my house he wouldn't have lasted as long in the 50s and 80s. Of course, nobody would. Rodgers, all these guys who last long, none of them would. Nowadays, they last longer. They throw money more because it's so much easier for them. It's so much easier. They don't have the, God forbid you hit him. Oh my God, penalty, if this and that. So yeah, I wouldn't want to be a defensive player if I was talented and coming out of college. I wouldn't want to be, unless you were a great pass rusher. The only ones that get some notability today are the every now and then great pass rushers. They'll get paid. Other than that, who gets paid in the defense? Do secondary people really get a lot of money nowadays? You know who gets the money? It's all the quarterbacks and the receivers. Those are the guys who get the bulk of your salary cap. Quarterback, receiver. Some of it dribbles down to running back, which you don't want to waste money on because they don't last long. Look at Dallas and that piece of shit, Ezekiel Elliott. I'm a Cowboys fan. Once they gave him money, right down, now he's gone. Nobody wants to pick him up. You don't spend money on running backs nowadays. You might spend money on an offensive lineman or two, but even that is iffy. You spend the bulk of your salary cap on one side of the ball on a receiver and a quarterback. Quarterback number one, and maybe a receiver or so. That's where you spend. And whatever's left dribbles down to the defense. And you wonder why the offenses are so far ahead of the defense. Because the league wants it that. As that guy said, because fans that really don't know the game, they're enticed by a lot of scoring. Numbers. Ooh, look at all this scoring. They've changed it that way. So that's my take on the game. I agree with these guys 100%. I don't think it's a better game nowadays at all. I look at the videos sometimes when I'm at the gym and they have like old retro games, like the Steelers and Vikings playing Super Bowl and it scores like 16-6 and in games like that, and saw how difficult it was to move the football. It was Fran Tarkenton, one of the best, just couldn't move the ball against the Steelers in the '74 Super Bowl. They had a rock-ribbed, fantastic defense. And this is a great quarterback who threw the ball very well. He couldn't do anything against that great defense. How difficult it was to score points. And if you did, it was a big deal. It meant something. You accomplished something. Now, when you can move the ball constantly down the field at will, anytime you want, wide open receivers, just that. When you can do that all the time, to me, it's just you've cheapened the game. You've cheapened up the what it means to get touchdown passes, what it means to completion percentage. Back in the day, I'll leave it at this. Back in the day, 70s, 80s, 90s, when I was growing up, even the best quarterbacks would throw sometimes over 20 interceptions a year. That's right. Some of the best. Some of the best. Nowadays, you throw 15 interceptions in a year like Prescott did, leading the league last year, and you're considered a bum. Why? Because defenses simply cannot do what they were allowed to do. And so it's, offenses rule. They rule. They rule. They move the ball easily. The completion percentages are almost everybody throws for over 60%. Back in the day, you hit 60%, you were one of the best. Now everybody throws. The shittiest team that wins 3 games has a quarterback throwing for 61.2%. Cheapens it up. But that's my talk for the day. Modern football. Not my style. Have a great day. God bless.